This podcast brought to you by Basecrete, leaders in waterproof bond coatings for the swimming pool and construction industry.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. Today I'm chatting with Kelly Oleary, owner of Oleary Pools out of Katy, Texas, and they build luxury custom pools around Houston. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show, Kelly.
Pleasure to be here. I appreciate you thinking about us and taking the time.
No problem. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about your background in the pool industry and Oleary Pools?
So my background, I started in the pool industry, I guess it was early 2000s, almost 20 years ago. I started as construction manager, so project managing side, didn't do the designs, really just focused on managing construction for a larger company. I'd been brought in from a friend of mine through high school, kind of married into the business. And at the time, they needed help with construction. They knew I had a background in construction. So they offered me a job, basically out of college, said, we'll offer you a good job. You interested? So I started managing. Back then, I probably would manage and oversee around anywhere from 65, 75 pools, so I would say 60 to 80 pools per year. So we had anything and everything at that time: bridges, rivers, waterfalls, grottos, you name it. We pretty much, would get dealt with those projects. They were one of the larger companies in Houston at that time. So we pretty much got to see a lot of experience in a short period of time managing construction for them. And that's really kind of how I got my feet wet in the industry.
We first met at the Genesis winemaker dinner in Dallas, and that was a fun night hanging out with you and Dustin. But I actually been following your work for quite a while. Jimmy Smith shoots a lot of your stuff, and how I first came across you was when I saw photos of this one great project in Houston that was kind of a geometric shaped infinity pool with a spa, had this great retaining wall with these sheer descents on it. You know what the project I'm talking about?
Okay, yeah, that would have been out a Missouri City part of Houston. We did that project. I can't remember what year exactly. It was a fun little project, especially because everyone else that came in there said you couldn't do an infinity edge. There wasn't enough slope on the property. So being able to focus on the line of sights and actually get that visual came out well. We had a great builder that's a friend of mine that built the house to work with, so he could take care of that portion. The material came out really well, and bringing Jimmy and his staff out there to photograph it. That was one of the first pools that Jimmy actually came out to photograph when we initially kind of started talking about what he does and how we can use that. So it's an interesting project because that was quite a while back when we did meet him. Now I love to say he's a good friend, but it was really interesting to bring him in and actually see what properly photographed pools can really look like, and it really blew me away.
Yeah, it was kind of a first departure for some of the earlier work that I've seen from you. I mean, which was more kind of like those free-form pools and those grottos and waterfalls and things of that nature. I mean, this had a more of a contemporary vibe and a more modern aesthetic. I mean, maybe you could talk to us kind of like about that kind of shift in your design habits, and the kind of pools you're focused on more in 2022 and building.
That's a pretty good point, because there was some evolution, and especially looking back at some of the projects that I've done, even my designs, when I go back through designs that we had sold and built, and even designs that I've saved that we just haven't been able to build yet, there has been quite evolution. I started my company, Oleary Pools and Design, in 2011. And so when we started it, I didn't really plan on, okay, this is my grandiose scheme, I'm going to start my own business. We kind of fell into it. The market was still recovering from, 2008, 9, and 10 era. And really at that time, it was just getting business, building pools and being able to just pay bills. And as we started to build more and design more, a lot of people helped inspire us. We always look at architecture and other things, but once I could start to really push the envelope of, okay, this is exactly what the client wants, and start to put in a little bit of my interpretation of what I would like to see or what I think they might like. Over the years, we've been able to actually shift away from your traditional, kidney bean pools or, your grotto rock waterfalls that have been in this area of the country just predominantly just over and over and over again. So it's kind of been a learning curve to be able to go, okay, how far can we push that envelope? And once we started to really get clients that were more accepting of us presenting contemporary designs or things that maybe they hadn't seen before, we could really start to showcase what we can do. And also that really, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Then we also started to dive down that rabbit hole and really start to look at other designers that we admire and look at what they do. And of course, then that pushes us to do better. Look at other architects that do things. And I think it's probably evolved. You've seen it, in a lot of the industry, that whether it's social media can help kind of propel that. We see things now at the speed of light. If something happens, we can look at other designs or other things that people are doing currently and see them instantly. So the design changes and trends, they shift really quick. So if we're not always thinking about, okay, what's next, what would be something new, you'll get stuck in a rut with repeating the same design, and you'll have various clients with the same exact pool. But it's been a learning curve to be able to push what I can get away with, what people are willing to accept. We've, over the last few years, we still have a lot of clients that have said, oh, we love that, but maybe not for this market, or we love that, but we don't think it's right for Houston. How do we get past that? That's something that we've learned over the last 10 years starting my company, and even probably further, probably into 20 years of figuring out how do you get away with that? How do you present that to the client? What are we really selling? Are we just selling a pool and a hole with water, or and that's evolving, and especially in the last few years with what we're doing, what we see, the industry shifting, and where we see ourselves as a company, and where I see myself as a designer and builder. And it's ever changing, especially in the last few years.
I know California is certainly having some kind of influence on some of the backyards that I see being built down in Houston, which is, bringing in more of those contemporary themes and a streamlined aesthetic, and that outdoor living environment that's kind of more conducive to that modern look and feel that I'm seeing in a lot of new homes being built down there. Are you seeing the same?
We're starting to see some of that. Austin is a good example, because Austin has some great landscape architectural firms, some great builders, some friends of ours that are phenomenal designers and builders, but the architecture of the homes there are a little bit above what we're doing, but that slowly will bleed into our market. So we're starting to see some of those design trends. We do still see some very traditional designs, depending on the architecture of the house and what area of Houston. There's some very traditional areas. There's some very modern and contemporary areas. So we're kind of seeing that. It's also what can we bring to it? People see a lot of things, and we try to avoid that clientele that goes, okay, this is what I've seen and this is what I want. Most of the time they don't know what they want. So if we can kind of show them things that may be of interest for their design trends, a lot of the landscaping, some of the architecture, even Australia. Sometimes people are surprised when I'm like, well, look into some of the things that they're doing over in Australia, or the landscape designs. And if you reach out even further than East and West Coast, and you go overseas and start looking at what's doing, you have a broader scope to be able to pull inspiration from.
What do you think high-end homeowners want to see in your design plans? What's the process like for you in terms of dialing in what the homeowner wants?
So, it's, of course, it's ever evolving. Every year you learn something more. Every year you get better. Every project you get better. But more so nowadays, we've really tried to push to where I keep a very open mind. Initially, I like to pretty much just see what's the property, what's the house. And I'll tell them, which a good friend of mine gave me that idea, was, tell the husband and wife or each spouse, tell each one to send me 4 or 5 photos of things they like, but don't share them with each other. Just send me what you like, whether it's, even if it's not a pool, if it's landscaping, if it's colors, if it's just things that inspire them and they like. And sometimes then we can look at those photos, and as a psychologist, you almost just try to break down, okay, what did they like about this? What emotions did it inspire? And then once we meet them, I can kind of go through the property, look through things that, of course, as a designer, you need to think about, entertaining spaces, sight lines, general things on the property that are more important as far as just parameters to be able to build in. But then let the client talk a lot. A lot of the times they'll be able to tell me, not necessarily this is what I want, but they're telling me more of what they don't want. Sometimes it's things they don't say. Even as far as looking around at what they chose to furnish the house, decorations that they picked that they probably didn't pick, it can tell you a lot about clients. An old boss of mine, when I was in oil and gas before this life here, told me, you go into a meeting and you look around at someone's office. If they have fishing pictures, they like fishing. But you do the same thing to a client. You can tell a lot by style of clothing, cars they drive, just everything that's in the atmosphere that they live in will tell you a little bit about it. And then you can start to kind of dissect that and figure out what exactly we need in the property. So of course it's kind of what is the client like, but a lot of the times they don't know. So we have to be able to pull that out of the architecture of the home, their personal taste, and then also what are the designs that's going to fit what lifestyle, not necessarily the lifestyle they have, but the lifestyle that we're creating and designing.
Well, I mean, on these high-end projects, in particular, some of these are not like a one and done where you submit a pool design and they're like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head the very first time. This is exactly what I want. I mean, a lot of times they have change orders, and that process, it could be months in the making before you can come up with a backyard concept that truly, hits all the notes on what they wanted. I mean, maybe you could talk to me a little bit about that.
A lot of the higher end ones, or the more elaborate and the more detail you get into, that's exactly it. Is you can't just take a couple of hours and design something and boom, that's perfect. That's exactly it. Some of the clients want more revisions. They want to see more changes. You need to present more information for them to narrow their vision down to that perfect end goal or end result of a master plan. Here's where everything goes. So a lot of things need to be kind of redirected. And if you don't manage expectations time on the client, you could go through thousands of revisions and then no one's ever happy. But a lot of times we've had clients to where they want to have continual revisions, more modifications, change this, change that. And that process can be long. And at the end, we go back to the first design I presented them. So if we take our time properly, we can really sometimes come up with exactly what fits that property and that client almost on the first shot. Now, once you have a lot of the parameters, especially on a property, we're not just designing a square or a pool. There's a lot of other things to think about. So you will need to adjust and modify. Maybe it's an entertaining spaces, socializing areas. Maybe those need to be moved around. Whether it's visual features, water features, or kitchen, patios, how is that going to work in relation to an evening of entertaining? Where are people going to go from one point to the next? So you do have to do that. But managing those clients so that you don't have an endless, never-ending design can be difficult sometimes, especially the larger ones. It's all about the details on those. Every corner and every inch has to be thought through. A lot of really good designers across the US have honed in their skills on that flawlessly. And you of course, talking to a lot of these designers and builders from East to West Coast, but it's always a challenge for smaller companies too, like us. But even the larger ones, it's a never-ending challenge with design. I can't think who said it. A well thought out design looks like it was easy and everyone would have thought of it, but a lot of thought goes into that to make it seem simple and seem easy.
Sure. I mean, here's a question I don't think I've ever asked before, but I mean, what do you do when a homeowner just submarines the entire process and say, this isn't what I want something completely different? I mean, has that ever happened to you? And what do you say when something like that happens?
I guess to share with the world, yeah, I mean, everyone probably has their own way of handling it. Sometimes you have to evaluate that on the fly. You have to know what's this client's temperament, and instantly you have to be able to read what you can get away with, or what they'll understand as constructive criticism versus what they may find offensive. Because a lot of the times the clients are like, look, I'm in charge, I know what I want. If they're just wanting me to go, yes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that's, and design, an ugly pig in the backyard, that's a whole nother story. But we come across some clients that do that, whether it's materials, we'll have a great design, and all the details are thought through, and then they start to come in and change the design. There's one pool I have in my past, we jokingly refer to it as my big fat Greek pool, because the design started out great, but just like the movie, once it was done and they made all their changes, the yard looked like my big fat Greek wedding. It did not, none of it was a cohesive material selection, design change, everything added on. So you take one of those and you'll never forget it. You learn from that. We've shifted our kind of client management style to a little bit more of what I do to recommend, even like material. I was talking to another designer, I think it was actually when we were at the international show, was sometimes I'll limit the material selections. I won't give them, 300 different material options to look through, because I find that they're less likely to be really very happy with that. Yeah. So if we know the general direction, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said, yeah, less is more sometimes.
It really is. It's just the psychology of selections. We know pretty much narrowed down to almost maybe in between a few. So sometimes I would even grab, the two options that we really like, and then a completely different option. And then once you see those next to each other, it really kind of, I guess you would call it the ugly tile in the room, really does showcase the tile that we were leaning toward. And it reconfirms that for the client, that they know, okay, yes, this is really the selection we want. And some of the other options, we pretty much just let the client know. I mean, there's things they can change, there's things they can't change. Some of the things they cannot change are safety things, things that deal with safety codes, structural codes, just general building codes, non-negotiable. Design changes within limits, but if it's a simple pool, they will maybe allow some more changes. If it's a more complex pool and it's really a passion project that we really have a lot invested in to be a part of it, we don't allow as much changes there, because you can spend a lot of time in that design, and then if it's not something that we can photograph or present, it doesn't have as much value to us, because we're growing and we're trying to really showcase what we can do. So managing those changes sometimes, of course, is hard. You're right. You can't just say, sure, we'll do everything and anything that you want. The client's always right. It's not really, maybe if we're selling ice cream, but we're far from that. So I think trying to manage that is always difficult, and is always different with different clients. Some clients, we've been able to say we have final say on all the material and any design changes. And they know us from other friends and other builds we've done, and they have no problem. They say, you know what you're doing. You do this more than we do. We trust you. And of course, we do show them and subtly give them the option. But we just kind of jokingly will tell them, put your faith in us, and we'll make sure it works out right.
I mean, a lot of these clients, they really, they want to have hands-on in terms of the design. And I mean, you've seen the same thing in the interior of their home as you see in the backyard. I mean, have you ever worked with a client that just requests an unreasonable amount of change orders? And I mean, how do you unwind and set and adjust expectations with a pain in the butt client when that happens?
Those really can be difficult ones. You can have the never-ending project. They continually want, okay, let's change this, let's add this. We have one currently that's wanting us to take on, we call it phase 2 of the project, because the pool's done. And at this point, we have other clients in line. So as busy as we are in the way that the market is nowadays, like that client, I'll simply let them know is that we have other clients that we have obligations to. So we need to move them along, and then we can get back to it. If they want to discuss, bringing us in to design, consult, or be a part of, the rest of the project, we have to be able to manage that in X amount of time frames. We can't stop everything we're doing to let them continually consume. It's time management on our part, and being fair to other clients. Sometimes price wise too, for us to start permitting and start all over on that permit process to add, the other half of the property into our scope of work, it's going to be X amount of dollars. So, whether that's sometimes the best thing to do is almost jokingly say, it's the I don't want to do it price. It costs too much for us to lose X amount of work to continually be invested in your project, never ending.
Right. You let those people kind of filter themselves out.
You really do. If clients are willing to wait, if they're willing to, pay for that one-off feature, we can work with them. But sometimes the wait is key. Is we can't neglect other clients to backtrack and take care of one, but you have to kind of manage all of them. And a lot of clients, once they understand, once I start your project, you want 100% of my attention. So just like the other clients that I'm about to finish, I have to give them 100% of my attention. They understand that, I think, because they all want me to be intimately involved. They want me on the job site every day. They want communication with me every day. A lot of the clients work with us simply because they want me there. They don't want another guy there. They don't want me to delegate that to some new guy. So once they understand that it's only fair to give my attention, to the clients, and they understand and appreciate that when we start their project, then they're going to have 100% of my attention. So sometimes they can be reasonable and understand, okay, I can't take, 12 hours every day of your day. But it's, like I said, it's a balancing act. How do you manage clients that, a lot of people would say, of course, yeah, if you have the money, we'll build it. But, of course, the project do have to come to an end. Managing the psychology of the clients as well. We remind them, if you have a never-ending project, you're going to get more and more stressed out and anxiety with the fact that your house, your property, and the front and backyard is always in continual limbo. There's dirt. We jokingly say there will be mud. There will be long periods of it. So if you stop the project, it just compounds the delays. And no matter what project, I almost think no matter what project, what design, or what builder they're working with, every homeowner or client at the end of the day, when things are finished, is happy to go, okay, I love you, thank you, but get out of my house. I'd love to have my yard back to normal. So keeping them focused on the end goal too, the light at the end of the tunnel, that finished presentation, and just moving the needle. Sometimes it's very subtle things, but it's a lot on the project management side to try to balance that act. I think every builder probably has that one client or a few clients occasionally that it just seems like the project is never ending.
Well, their biggest pain point when building a custom pool is obviously how long it takes. We see this a lot, but what are some of the challenges that you see, or an example of some of the things that come up that high-end clients can do to torpedo the process?
I think the biggest thing that clients can do on the higher end projects is change orders, design revisions, things like that, because that can stop the entire project. If we want to add things that have to be permitted and have to be engineered or have to be redesigned, you can't do, if you have underground mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and all these other things that need to be done, you really can't do hardscapes. You can't do some of the other finished material selections, paint, trim, finishes like that, without going back and making sure that all the underground is done. So the entire project can actually stop until the design is done, modified, added. Then your permitting is done. Then you can get all of your underground stuff. So some of those projects can delay things substantially. Change orders, material selection changes to the design would be the biggest thing, because it's not that we're just making a quick change. You have to you have to reschedule and coordinate almost a circus of crews. And so every small thing during a build, every action has an equal or opposite reaction. Little things like that can delay everyone. And then if we have 10 or 15 crews now that are all pushed back, that can turn into a 3 to 5 day lead time to change material, or a 1 to 2 week lead time. Then the material shows up. Next thing you know, you're 2 to 4 weeks of downtime because the other crews were obligated to other jobs. And so it's a spiral effect of managing the timelines and the build process for all the other trades that have to follow. So change orders, we tell clients we can't give them, we can't give them exact dates, but that's the biggest thing that can delay. You can have every plan, everything scheduled, but when changes come up, you have to shift your schedule on the fly.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges is that homeowners have no idea how long construction actually takes. I mean, another thing is that, like, how much pools actually cost to build. I mean, but what do you say to a customer who has unreal expectations, like Dom Perignon taste on a Coors Light budget?
Well, yeah, depending on the client and their level of how serious they are, or if they can, kind of joke around with you a little bit and kind of understand some very good analogies, you can kind of explain it different ways to clients. Sometimes in a nutshell, you can simply say, okay, what's your budget? And then once they kind of tell you the budget after they've given you this list, you go, okay, let's start removing everything to get to that budget. Now you have to remove this, you have to remove that. Once you start removing everything, they can tell, no, wait, we don't want to remove that. We're not happy with it. That really changes everything back to a project they don't want. So, managing the clients that are just unreal, if it's realistically, if it's horribly unrealistic, if their budget is really unattainable, we just have to tell them it's just not possible. A lot of the clients, whether they come from different industries, different backgrounds, they may not know what all goes into managing a project and finishing a project that's going to be designed right and built correctly. So they think sometimes it's very easy. The crews just show up and everything just builds itself. But they don't understand all of the detail that goes into it. So the more we can explain, this is the process and this is what has to be done, they can start to realize that project that they saw on HGTV or that they saw on the internet actually is quite expensive, quite complicated to build. So managing, what people think, even sometimes where it's designs and construction documents, they think we can just plug and play a pool and this whole property is going to design itself. And when we tell them, no, you have, anywhere from 20, 30, 40, maybe 40 to 60 hours or more just in trying to design that, make everything fit, they kind of start to realize, okay, there's more to this than we thought. This isn't just simple. And I think that helps a bit.
Yeah, I would imagine over the last couple of years, the demand has been so unprecedented that I'd imagine that you've been able to kind of cherry pick which projects you want to kind of take on. Has that led to some more bigger and elaborate jobs?
It really has. They were kind of unintended consequences. Initially was we were overwhelmed. We could only take on so many projects. We started to see that the build time was taking longer. And we didn't want to overcommit and oversell like a lot of the people in the industry did. And then you're playing catch up. You're getting in trouble with homeowners. You're getting in trouble with clients on, you just bit off more than you can chew. So once we started to scale back and we knew we could realistically only take this many projects, we had to kind of cherry pick. And the clients, luckily with the clients that we had worked with, started to understand that. And they understood, okay, we know there's a lead time. We would rather wait for you. So the clients that were willing to wait for us, we really just reminded them, and it has to be the projects, say, I guess it was end of last year. Yeah, maybe the end of last year, 2021, we only had so many jobs we could take at the end of the year. And if they weren't a project that was really, really good for our portfolio, or I was extremely passionate about, I simply couldn't take the job. a lot of the industry, it's been very crazy for the last few years. So the main thing was too is not to get burnt out. If I'm not passionate about the job, it may show in my day-to-day operations. So if I have that passion and that excitement, more so than the client about their project, they see it and they love seeing that I'm that passionate about it. So we started to pick them, and we started to really do that. There's one project in particular that we've been trying to work on, and a lot of the great tile installers, I've loved watching their stuff for many, many years. And we've tried to get an all tile mosaic pool in Houston. I've probably been talking with a few people and pitching that for 3 or 4 years. So we finally designed one, and, you know, the design, the property is phenomenal, but if we couldn't do the all tile mosaic pool and they were going to go to plaster, change the entire design, we simply told them that it's not a project we can take this year. We're going to have to move that to 2022 because we only had so many spots. And once we said that, they understood, and then they were ready to move forward with the all tile mosaic vessel. And that's how we got the opportunity to work with Ray Corral and Mosaicist.
Awesome. Yeah, he does great work. I mean, honestly, have you been able to fully capitalize on the demands, that you've seen over the last 2 years? I mean, do you think that, given the amount of leads that you've had come in, have you been able to build even a fraction of those leads that have come in?
So I think in part, yes. We've been able to capitalize on really getting great projects, bigger and better projects, and more intricate designs, and being able to push the limit quite a bit more than we ever have. But at the same time, I think because we're not set up like a lot of the large companies, I think there's a lot of missed opportunities. There's a lot of clients that have waited, to get designs or for me to build their project, we simply can't get to. So I think if we were structured differently, we could have capitalized and maybe took advantage of what we had and been able to service and help more clients. But at the same time, not every pool is right for you. Maybe not every project is right for you. So sometimes saying no to those is good. I think we in hindsight, of course, you can look back and go, if we would have just had these people in place, we could have been more efficient. We could have taken on more projects. So I think that's one opportunity lost that we learned from, as far as I don't think anyone really knew the demand was going to be that high. But at the same time, I'm happy with letting those go to have more passion projects, more projects that are more exciting, more collaborations with other designers. Example, collaborating with Mosaicist. That's something I've wanted for years, and that project is just stunning. So I think it's kind of on some aspects, we've been able to capitalize and really make a change in the image of where we're going as a company. On the other hand, I think because we weren't scaled, we did lose out on some of the business that people just weren't willing to wait the lead times that we're experiencing.
Well, I mean, this industry is kind of cyclical, and I'm sure you're noticing the same things even in Houston where gas prices are really cheap. But I mean, inflation and the price of fuel and, a retraction in the demand for swimming pools as COVID restrictions are relaxing and travel is resuming to normal pace again. Conditions for this demand are kind of fading out. And with that comes kind of recalibration back to pre-COVID norms in terms of demand. How have leads been this year for you in comparison to the last 2 years? You noticing things tapering off a bit in terms of demand, or still things crazy, or what's going on?
So I think it might be a little bit different for me, just because some of the other builders I talked to in the area, they've been experiencing leads tapering off substantially. I think a lot of that is just the cost. If the cost, it's unsustainable for the cost of your average consumer pool to continue to decline at that rate. Eventually, people will say it's unattainable. We can't build that pool. So I've been hearing a lot of that. The clients that we have, though, some of them right now are almost inflation proof. And we made a decision, 2019 and 20 to change the direction we were going as a business. It was a bit risky, but I think it's probably paid off because we we still have plenty of leads. We have a good friend of mine's a builder. They're willing to wait until we can get to them on 4 projects this year. So we'll take those later in the year. So I'm not experiencing it maybe as much as others, simply just because of the position we put ourselves in as a company.
Right. I mean, what type of pool projects are you focused on building these days, and where do you see the evolution of your company heading into 23?
So right now we're doing a couple of projects that we're collaborating on with Randy Angel Designs out of Plano and Dallas area. Another good friend, phenomenal
Sure.
designer. So being able to work with him is very exciting because he's one of the best at what he does. So those projects are quite a bit different because we don't typically get large master plan projects on that scale. So seeing the shift that we're able to do those type of projects with him, and we're not just designing a pool. We're doing furniture, we're designing furniture, as well as selecting furniture and installing everything that you need for that backyard. So instead of just selling simply a pool, we're really trying to change the lifestyle, or sell a lifestyle. So it's furnishings, accessories. A lot of the other designers around the US are pretty much doing the same thing with where they've went is, it's not just a pool, it's a pool, and it's landscaping, it's outdoor living design. And that encompasses everything. That's not just a swing set or a pool or an outdoor kitchen. Furniture, accessories, and a lot of things like that we're starting to push. That's started to bring us different clientele when they see we do that in a market where not a lot of people do. In the Houston market, there's not a lot of people that will go to that level of detail to selecting, furniture, plants. We had a client a few years ago who asked that when we started working on the design is, how do you plan on entertaining? What do you guys have now for entertaining? Do you guys have stuff for your new outdoor kitchen? They had nothing. They're like, well, no, we don't have anything. Well, what do you have for entertaining? Do you have when people come over? And they had nothing. So we said, okay, well, let's make some selections for you. We designed everything that they needed for outdoor entertaining and cooking, everything they needed for entertaining, for glasses for the kids that look like glass, but they're not going to break near a pool, so it's safe. And once we started to do that, I think they really shared it with a lot of their friends that they just never thought of all the things that they're going to need in this new lifestyle that they have. And the amount of time they spend outside, it was well worth it. So the more clients we can have like that, the larger projects, I enjoy those. Managing those sometimes can be pretty challenging, but larger, more complicated, per se, one-off projects, I see that's where we're going as a company. We still want to take on some of the average pools. Not everyone needs to spend, what could be, it's relative, but an absolute fortune to be able to get that pool and that lifestyle that they want. So we still want to be reasonable and attainable to, your average pool client. We would just prefer to try to make material selections that are very unique, try to do very subtle design changes that are just very unique. Sourcing material that no one else in Houston or the area uses. That's another great thing that can set us apart. Picking material that they have no idea where we got it, and it's not available locally. That's a great feature. When their friends come over, it's not the same material they see on their pool. No one's ever seen it, and they love it. Clients want their pool to be unique. They want their pool to be special. They don't want their friends to come over and go, yeah, my pool has the same thing. It's pretty much the same as mine.
Well, I appreciate your insights on a variety of different topics that we hit on today, Kelly. As always, great conversation when I speak to you. So definitely appreciate having you on the show today. Thanks so much.
No worries. Like I said, I'm a small guy in the industry, so anything I can contribute, I'm happy to. I appreciate speaking with me.
That's all the time we have today. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Basecrete, the leaders in waterproof bond coats for the swimming pool industry. Please make sure to subscribe, and we look forward to catching you next time on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast.